Okay, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to have our guest is a principal at an international school in Beijing, China, Todd Kuhns. He'll be joining us shortly, so stay tuned and you may share the link as well to your friends so they can benefit from this conversation. We're going to talk about travel or false stereotypes. And Todd has been living in China for about good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us. For about 5 years, more than 5 years in Beijing, China, and he has lived in Japan, in Vietnam as well. So with this experience, we can learn a lot from him. He's from the States. So if you have questions, feel free to type in the comment section below, and you may interact as well in the comment section. Once again, good evening. And shortly, Todd will be with us and join us in our conversation.
Hello.
Hello, Todd. We're live.
We are live, finally.
We are live.
It's been a
while.
Yeah. And it's smooth and clear and clean and crisp.
Great. So you're now using your house's Wi-Fi, huh?
I am using my house's Wi-Fi.
Great. So yeah, I can hear you clearly now.
Good. Yeah, the last time we tried to do this, my house Wi-Fi wasn't working, and I was trying to do it from a restaurant. That didn't work.
Yeah, but that's what you've said. Third time is a charm. So I think we're gonna just do it this evening.
Yes. Cool.
So
I'm ready.
We're just waiting for more people to join for a few minutes. Have you shared this on your timeline already? You can share it as well on your.
I shared the meeting invite, but can I share the actual
video? You can share it. It's on my timeline.
Do that right now.
Yeah, so your friends can also watch.
All right. All right. It is shared.
So how are you doing there in Beijing?
So you do this every week? Oh, not too bad. Rodgers, did you hear about that? I think it's on the news.
I seldom watch the news nowadays, but my friends told me.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's not good.
We and we're practicing when they're out anymore. It's easier to get into restaurants, shops, and things. I was super happy and very relaxed, and they even they made a gate across our neighborhood, our community. Temporary gate in there since like February, and they stopped checking our admission cards at the door, at the gate.
Yeah.
And I started going by, nobody there at all. So people were coming and going just left and right. Felt great. And that went on for about 2.5, maybe 3 weeks. And then suddenly one day they were back out. They had it all set up again, and I checked the news, and they had found that outbreak at that market, and everything went on lockdown, and it was like we were back to square one. Not completely, because they didn't make the whole city kind of lock down, but everybody just went back to the way they were like 3 weeks before. Just a little anxiety, what's going on, and you had to show your app to get in anywhere, and they were going back around and doing all the social distancing and telling you to wear your mask. And I just felt like, man, this has got to end at some point, I
Right.
mean, you can't just have a few cases. You can't get down to zero. It's kind of how I feel about it. Like, it might be unrealistic, we're going to have to live with it at some point. But
Right.
I do
Right.
appreciate what the government's been doing to at least make us feel pretty safe. They swept in and quite frankly, I mean, it's like China's, the government is just like overkill. Here, they
Yeah.
sweep in, they lock
I
down the
agree.
neighborhood, all the neighborhoods around, test everybody. I think after that first week, they had done 200,000 tests. And just today,
Mm.
they set up a testing station in our community. And anybody, anytime could go by there and just get a free test. So I think they've been
Oh
doing
man.
that at communities all over the city.
One of the
Just
issues that
trying to
the citizens here are complaining about is
catch
lack of testing.
asymptomatic cases.
It's beginning.
Yeah.
It's beginning to be choppy again. Can you hear me? It's begun.
I'm gonna
It's becoming choppy again.
close
Can I
it.
hear you?
Oh no.
Can you hear me?
Your video is coming through just fine.
Oh, there you go. It's better now. I can hear you now.
It's all caught up again.
Yeah, a while ago it was becoming choppy again. I can't hear what you were saying.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Now it's becoming. Are you using VPN though for Zoom? Are you using your VPN?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, is that
I think
smart?
that's better. Yeah, I think that's good because last time we did this with Ruby and some of my friends, they were using VPN as well.
Mm.
All right, so one more minute to go before 8, and then we're gonna start. More people are joining us.
Nice.
I can
How many
see
do we have?
Summer. Summer is watching. Remember Summer?
Nice number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Summer.
It's been a while.
All the way from Korea. She's now in South Korea.
She's in Korea now?
He's
Oh
in
my
Korea. I think the last time I think I saw you was 2017. In Beijing,
Yeah,
you were still connected with Disney English.
that's right. I was just wrapping that up, basically. That would have been probably March or April. Because I stopped with Disney English March of 2017.
Oh, so you were there for just a year because he arrived 2016. I remember.
Yep, I got there in 2016. I was there for almost a full year. I was there almost to the end of my contract. My wife, she managed to finish out her contract, even though she was pregnant.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why we left Disney.
Right.
She went, teaching those kids and doing those classes up until she was about 8 months.
Oh man.
And then she said, oh, I just can't handle it anymore. And finally took her maternity. I just can't handle it anymore. And finally took her maternity.
Sometimes the connection is lagging once in a while.
Sound,
I think we just have to deal with this.
yeah.
Can you still hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the connection is becoming choppy. I don't know, maybe my internet or I don't know, but I guess we just need to we just get to deal with this. It's fine.
Okay.
All right, can you hear me, Todd?
I can still hear you.
Okay, great. Because I cannot hear you now. But I
You
can,
can't hear me now?
yeah. Okay, there is. It's becoming better again. Sometimes it will just, it
All right.
happens once in a while. It's fine. All right. Once again, good evening to everyone. We're joined today by Todd. Todd is based in Beijing, China. He's actually a principal in an international school there. He's from the US, and he was able to live in Japan as well. And his wife is Vietnamese American. So once in a while, he goes to Vietnam. And today we're gonna talk about false stereotypes, especially these beliefs of people about other countries, especially if they haven't been to those particular countries. We have this set of beliefs, and today we're going to discuss about those things based on our experiences, Todd and I, most especially Todd, because he's been living abroad for a long time, 5 or 6 years in China, right?
Yeah, we're going on our 5th year now. Yep.
Oh yeah, 5th year. So I remember before coming to China, you were living in Japan.
That's right. Yeah, we went to Japan right after my wife and I got married on the JET program. We were just looking for an adventure. Like, I actually didn't know much of anything about Japan, except that Japan was really popular in the States.
Yeah.
People like Japanese culture. They like the anime. They think it's crazy. Japanese TV's crazy and all this stuff. And that was about the extent of what I knew about the country. So we had some friends who had gone before, and they came back that summer that we were getting married and said, hey, we're in Japan. We're having a good time. We're on this program. And I just turned to my wife and I said, we should try that. Like, we don't have a house yet. We don't have kids. We don't even have a car. We have no obligations. Let's try something fun while we can. So we spent our first 3 years of our marriage over in Japan with the JET program, which was
So upon coming to Japan, any surprises? Like, did you have any expectation? And then when you got there, you had maybe some surprises that you didn't expect?
Well, there were a few things, right? The first thing that we knew about Japan was it must be this high-tech wonderland.
Yeah.
I don't know what, it's just always had that reputation from the 80s. One, we had cell phones, and so I thought, oh, we're just going to be wowed by Japanese technology and how advanced everything is here. That's what we'd seen in the movies and whatnot. But we were quite shocked. I don't want to dog on Japan, but it seemed to be almost the opposite. As far as electronics go and phones at the time or whatever, it was very impressive and very cool. We actually resisted getting phones just because we weren't used to having cell phones, and we didn't want the expense, and it was hard to believe now, but at the time, it wasn't a huge priority for us. But everything else seemed a little lacking for us. For example, our apartment didn't have insulation.
Heater.
Yeah, no insulation, and so we had a unit kind of like we have up in here, little air conditioner and heater unit, and we could turn it on, and we could maybe get the house cool in the summer or warm in the winter. But then as soon as we shut it off, instantly everything's back to being hot or cold. So we learned, to open the doors and the windows and get fans going and use this Japanese thing called a kotatsu, which is a table, that has a heater underneath it. You put a quilt over that table, and you put the tabletop on it, and you sit underneath it with your legs and just have that quilt over you. And here we are in 2001, huddled under a table with this kind of ancient heating system in a house with no insulation, running a kerosene heater every now and then, but you can't leave that going forever. You got to vent that every 3 hours. So, open the window, and in comes all the cold air. And in what we thought was the most high-tech advanced country in the world,
Right.
So
I remember
that was,
I even remember an article of someone who went there as well to live there, and that's exactly what he thought about Japan, where he expected this very high-tech country. But the thing is, there's still a lot of appliances that are very old, but they're still using it. For example, payphone is still a thing. I was there in 2015, and during those times, a lot of people have phones already, smartphones, but payphone is like most of them still use payphones, for example, in Japan.
yeah. I mean, even now, I was shocked at our school. Every other room, before we went into our classroom, we had to bring they had kerosene heaters in the classroom. For the winter.
Sometimes I cannot hear you, but just
For the
just
winter. Oh, so is it lagging or you can't hear me at all?
yeah, it's just lagging. I can hear some of what you're saying, but just letting you know that sometimes it's lagging. That's why maybe I can't respond to what you're saying, but it's okay because I'm checking on my phone. I think they can hear you. The people can still hear what you're saying, but it's just so you know that sometimes I don't respond because I don't. Sometimes it lags that I don't understand what you're saying.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can deal with that.
yeah.
So yeah, so that was kind of really interesting for us, and they use fax machines still faxing,
Right.
email, all this stuff. Japanese business world, it's interesting thing about the Japanese culture. It's not a bad thing actually. Everything's got its pluses and minuses in my perspective. But we just went back there in two years ago for the first time since 2004 when we left,
Mm-hmm.
and we were, for our sake, pleasantly surprised at how it was almost exactly the same. Like nothing had changed.
Right.
So it was a great experience for us. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, man, that's kind of sucks for them. Like, nothing's really, you don't get the sense that things are progressing, but I think that's the culture. They really like to hold on to their traditions and their values and their beliefs. And they feel like kind of a long time ago, I got the sense that Japanese people sort of feel like a long time ago, they kind of figured everything out. This is the ideal way to do this. This is the ideal way to do that. And they kind of locked that in and still really hold on to that. So
Exactly.
they make good phones and electronics and cameras and things like that. But as far as a lot of other things about daily life, they're still doing things the older, more traditional way. And again, there's something kind of nice about that, but something rather inconvenient when you're expecting to come into a technological wonderland and things are, even less convenient than they were for you back home.
I remember going there in 2015, and I was shocked because coming from Beijing, especially during the time Beijing, they were building a lot of things. A lot of buildings were new, and they were so advanced in a lot of things in terms of technology. And then coming in Tokyo, I was surprised by the buildings were nice, but they're kind of old, especially compared to Beijing. So I was a bit shocked as well comparing Beijing and Tokyo to think that I was expecting a more advanced Tokyo, but when I got there, Beijing was by far more advanced than Tokyo in terms of buildings, technology, and the usage of the internet, for example.
Yeah.
And one of the things,
Easy, right?
right, and one of my
It's
stereotypes
like
about, yeah, go.
China.
And one of my stereotypes about.
We got a lag.
But you can still hear me, right? You can still hear what I'm saying.
I hear you just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think it's just me. It's fine. I remember one of the before coming into Japan, growing up, we were watching war movies, right? About Japanese war movies, and in schools we were learning about World War II and all of that stuff. So I had this idea before coming to Japan that Japanese people are kind of cruel just because of the movies that I watched when I was a kid and the stories of my teachers in elementary about World War II, the atrocities of the Japanese people, the cruelty that they did during World War II. So I had this belief that Japanese people are cruel, before coming to Japan. And when I got there, I was so surprised because by far they are the most polite people I've met in all my travels. It's crazy.
It's so true. Well, when we were there, it was 2001, and we were there when the Twin Towers got hit in New York City. So that was a very surreal experience for us to experience that from afar. And I don't know how many people, were old enough at that time or remember that time, but when that was going down, there was a lot of talk about us going to war with Iraq, going to war in Afghanistan, and all this stuff. And my students were just beside themselves at the very idea that we would even be considering going to war. Like you said, they're so peaceful now, which is interesting because I think they still have this stereotype all across Asia. There are a lot of folks who remember the World War, to the time when they were pretty ruthless. Their army was pretty ruthless and did some absolutely horrible things to China. I mean, we all kind of know this, and they're just not willing to believe that the country is that far off from being able to do that again. And so I even met friends, in my travels who have very strong opinions about Japan. Never kind of from this, history. And these folks seem to be the last people in the world who wanted to go to war with anybody by now.
Yeah, and I remember the politeness of the people there is
And
just on a different level.
here
Like, do you have any experiences of
I
politeness
was
that you
not
haven't
that.
seen in any other
And
country
here
in
I
Japan?
know that. That's funny you mentioned that about Japan, Regin. I mean, it's not funny because everybody says this when they go to Japan, right?
Yeah.
Oh, everybody's, irashaimase, smiling, like the best customer service you could possibly imagine. If you stop someone on the street, like, and you need directions to somewhere, you want some help with the train tickets, they will help you. It's almost like ingrained in the culture that they're obligated to help you. But there was a side to that I got to figure out while I was there, that it's an obligation. And the way they are in their face and their expression and the fact that they're helping you does not necessarily mean they want to be doing it.
Oh,
Inside, there may be very inconvenienced. They may be on their way to an important meeting and they're late and they're going to miss their train, but they're going to totally embarrass themselves if they don't stop and help you when you're asking them this question. So it's a kind of selflessness, but also deep down inside, I think there's that aspect too, where they're just kind of like me, like
right.
you don't really want to be doing it. Maybe you're in a hurry, but it's a social obligation. And so once I learned that, I started to realize there is a bit of a dark undercurrent to that very proper and prim society. There are people who are frustrated and families that are unhappy, and they're sort of forced day in and day out to put on this smiling face and be extremely polite to each other. And that, it causes problems. It's why a lot of, Japanese guys like my coworkers or whatever go out and drink with their coworkers after work just to like let loose and be able to say what they wanted for a while. While they were drinking and doing, talking, they could do and say whatever, and it wasn't going to come back to haunt them the next day, but it was really kind of sad in that way. And it was hard for us to actually get to know Japanese people really well because they're pretty guarded.
Right.
We found them anyway, pretty guarded, very, very polite, very friendly. But I don't really felt like I got to know anybody on a deep level during my 3 years there, and not for want of trying. So That was something I didn't expect. You know, that's a case of where I think the stereotype, you know, what you see on the surface, there's more going on down below that you don't really see.
Right. I think that's also the advantage of actually living in a country because as a
It
tourist, we
takes time and experience in that culture.
right. I think
Go lag again.
yeah, like what you've said, you're able to experience those things because you actually live in the country. And as a tourist, I guess we don't really experience the real culture of a country as compared to someone who actually lived there, like what you did. Because as a tourist, I just saw like the polite side of the people, and I didn't know that there's also this conformity thing about these Japanese people, that this the reason why they're doing it. So I think that's one of the advantage of actually living in a country compared to us just traveling as a tourist and just being there for 5 days, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
Yeah.
Where else did you lived in China, right, Regin? You lived in China for a while?
Yeah, I've lived in China and I also live in, before going there, I've lived in Thailand. And when you were
Mm.
saying that, I remembered one of the culture of Thai people as well is kind of similar to what you were saying a while ago about Japanese people, where even if they do want to do it, they will just do it to save face. You know, face is a huge thing in Asian culture. And in Thailand, for example, they will
Hmm.
smile in front of you even if they don't like you. Sometimes they do that. And I think it's an Asian thing in general. Like we call it the Thai smile, where they don't want to lose face. They don't want confrontation, but at the back of their mind, they do want to do it. Like, so that reminded me of Thai culture as well. And you were talking about the politeness of the Japanese people.
I've never lived in Thailand. How long did you live there?
I was there for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I've only visited. And I got just like you, I felt like, oh, everybody here is really friendly. Of course, I was visiting the touristy areas. Of course, they're going to be friendly for it. You know, they're smiling at you on one hand and trying to get you to buy their stuff with the other. So that's, you know, not the living and breathing there experience that you got. But yeah, I think also as a tourist in Thailand, you come away with that very same impression you came away with Japan. Is, oh, everybody's just so happy and friendly with each other. How great is this? But there is something nice about that, right? I mean, it's complicated. I mean, in the US, you can go to a store, you can be on a bus, or you can be walking around, and it's not uncommon to encounter somebody who's having a bad day. And then one way or another, they'll kind of take it out. Understands there's a, a surprise for those people around us we have to deal with day in and day out. You know, it's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
two sides of a coin. So
And you've been living in China for like almost 5 years, you've said. And before going there, like we were talking with my friends last time about this. Before coming to China, we had lots of thoughts in our head about the country. Uh, it has this reputation outside of China that the country is not safe and all that stuff. That it's the people are going to be unkind to you and all that stuff. And basically, what your imagination is the things that you see in movies. Like I remember talking to one trainer at Disney that she said before coming to China, she was imagining that China is like that Beijing is like just full of hutongs, old buildings because that's what she saw in movies. And when we got there, we were so surprised by how modern it is, and also how friendly the people are to us, and we were treated as family. And I just realized that, in my experience, I realized that China is, I think, the most misunderstood country in the world, in it, based on my experience, because outside of China, people has a different perception of that country. But for me and my friends who lived there for 5 years, we really love our time in China. We enjoyed our time there. We had good memories. We love the country. So how about your experience? Can you tell us about your experience before coming to China? And maybe you have friends as well who has this perception towards China, that we can clear these things up.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it definitely deserves to be cleared up. And it's funny, we're having this talk and people are watching us on Facebook. And when I'm on Facebook, I feel like I'm constantly trying to battle the misinformation about China. I'm reading news reports and American media and stuff, and it's frustrating to me. And I'm not a citizen of this country, I'm just living here for a while, but still it's frustrating to me that it's always negative. I mean, almost always negative. It's very hard who would put the positive as this deeply controlled by the government to make laws are harsh and of being too positive when you're telling the truth about a country, where you've been living for 4 years and they've never been, their whole lives. Do you have to deal with that too?
Oh, a lot of times. But the thing is, what I've noticed is my friends who has this negative feelings towards the country are those who haven't been to China.
Yeah.
They haven't been to China at all. They haven't stepped in China. Maybe they've been in Hong Kong, or most of them haven't even been to Hong Kong or to Macau. But that's the most they have been. But they have this negative feelings towards the country, and they have this idea towards the country, but they haven't been to the country. But I have friends as well who visited me, who has been to China. And the thing is, my friends who have been to this country are the ones who love the country. So let that
Yeah,
sink in, like the ones
exactly.
who haven't been. So what are the common stereotypes of your friends towards China, for example? Can you give us a specific details about some of their thoughts about the country?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost entirely political, and it's, I'm 42 and many of my friends are around the same age or older. And when we grew up, in the 80s, and we were learning about very little about China, by the way, but what we learned about it was basically, oh, it's a communist country and they had this horrible, failed experiment where a lot of people were killed. And then Tiananmen Square massacre happened when I was a kid. And I remember watching that on TV. And so it seems like everybody's mind is stuck back in that era. And they just project that China is still that way now, because
Right.
that's the last they ever learned about China, right? And I mean, I was the same way. I mean, before I
Exactly.
came out here, I really didn't know anything about China. But I wasn't as afraid because, I very waste was what, growing up. So, but I had friends back home who the word communist just kept coming up. And one of my really, really good friends pulled us aside before we came. He said, look, I'm really scared that you guys are going there. I mean, he was genuinely scared, thinking that our lives would be in danger, you know, like we're walking into a war zone or something. And this is a guy who hasn't traveled hardly at all. And I probably have countries, China, its own form of capitalism, but we're far off from the 70s, you know, when they had this true communism here, where people were working the land and everybody was getting paid a salary and you couldn't own a business or anything like that. And China hasn't been that way since the early 80s. And since then, you know, people have opened businesses, very successful ones, some worldwide conglomerates. A lot of the things that we know and love in the States have come from Chinese companies. They're kind of taking over the world right now. And that didn't just crop up overnight, you know. But maybe it seems like it because it's gone so quickly. I mean, between the mid 80s and now is not that many years compared to how long a lot of countries take to develop. And China has certainly should get a lot of credit for being able to develop so quickly, almost getting ahead of themselves in some ways. So you do have a legal system that's still not quite there yet, right? It's still, things are still a little dicey as far as negotiation happens, and laws are a little unclear, and there's a lot of interpretation, you know, involved in the case of the people who, you know, might arrest you or do judgments and things like that. But that's going to get solved eventually. You know, probably all of our countries went through this period at one time. But walking down the street, I thought Japan was safe. You know, I thought Japan had to be the safest country in the world. But there were areas in Osaka that we knew you couldn't go down. There were streets where you needed to be with somebody, especially if you were in the, you know, the seedier places. You know, there was a Yakuza presence, and it's right there. And they don't hide themselves. And I have friends who got beat up in bars, you know, and got into trouble and things like that. I can't even imagine that happening here. I mean, I go out, I walk down any street I want, the darkest alley in the middle of the night, and never once am I worried for my safety.
No.
It's so bizarre. And I don't know how people can, you know, it's just, so this it feels it's gonna be, and I don't think it's just because, I don't even think it's because the people are just so terrified of the oppressed step on about this. And to me that, and I think this is a little true of a lot of Asia, that, and I don't know why this is, and maybe this is something I need to unpack for myself, but it's just, people in general don't seem to have this propensity for violence, to just immediately jump in and take a physical, violent, yelling, even verbally violent, you know? They're just a little more polite, just a little more considerate of each other, and not so quick to just start fighting. And I don't know why that is, but I've experienced it in Japan. I experienced it here. I sort of feel like it's similar that way, like in Thailand and Vietnam, you know, places that I visited for a while. I just feel safer overall, because I know they're bad people, but I don't feel like, just as an innocent guy walking down the street minding his own business, I'm ever going to be subjected to that, you know?
Like what you've said, I've been to many countries, and for me, China is, if not the safest, it's like they're maybe on top 2 or top 3 safest country I've been to. And I didn't really expect it to be that way.
Yeah. Now, it's not entirely safe. I mean, you could get hit crossing the street.
Right.
There are other ways that your life could be in danger. The traffic is terrible in Beijing.
Yeah,
But
in the beginning I thought because people are scared of, the law enforcement and all that stuff, which is partly true. But like what you've mentioned, that people are genuinely not really trying to harm you. And I also experienced, that's also my thoughts when I was there. It's like at first I thought, oh, it's very safe because they're scared of the police, all that stuff. But once you get to know them, the citizens or your friends, you get to realize that these people, they don't want trouble. I think they're just
yeah,
used to order or something. Maybe the communist government has a factor on this, that like from the beginning they were trained to follow orders. I think it's ingrained in them. I don't know exactly what the reason is, but I genuinely think
you're right.
that these people won't really harm you, not just because they're scared of the police or something.
Yeah, think you're right. You're right. I think influence here is so much stronger than I expected, and do their own thing, um, and get them out of the house and to experience that independence and do that. Whereas here, my Chinese friends, they don't understand that. They think it's kind of like cruel. Don't your parents love you? Don't you? Oh, they want to take care of them, and don't you want them? Don't they want to take care of you? And so there's definitely a closeness, and a lot of my adult friends are still very much concerned about doing what their parents want them to do, listening to their parents for advice. Um, they have this level of respect, and it's not a similar level that I have with my parents. By the time I reach a certain age with my parents, we had much more of a friendship, and that's what we kind of, to this day, we feel we're more like peers, um, and that started happening when I was in college. So here, I'm not sure. I don't want to speak too much on something I don't know for sure, but I get this sense that that's not really the same kind of relationship that Chinese kids end up having with their parents, even well into adulthood. Um, so that might have something to do with it. If we're all sort of interconnected and interdependent across the generations, parents are still looking out for their kids, kids are looking out for their parents. And not trying to be so independent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying people aren't selfish, but maybe it's just a different kind of selfish that doesn't lead to the kind of stuff we experience more often in the States,
Yeah, I think that's also there are some advantages as well in terms of culture, like what you've mentioned in Asian culture. I think it's not just China, but in general in Asian culture, there are close family ties. And some of my friends are, even though it's their culture, some of them don't can also see some of the disadvantages of it. Like sometimes they envy the Western culture of how independent you are once you get to 18 years old, and you get to have to decide your life, for example. So I think there are some advantages. But one of the issues
Yeah.
about a country, like what you've mentioned, what you were mentioning on your Facebook, I read them once in a while, especially when this pandemic happened, is the food that the Chinese people are eating. It has become an issue ever since this
Mm.
pandemic started. They have a belief that Chinese people, like the general diet consists of these exotic animals, especially bats, because of the coronavirus and all that stuff. So people who haven't been to this country, that's their idea, that in a normal restaurant, for example, you can order a bat soup or or in a normal family dinner you have like roasted cat or something like. And when I hear people
Shark
talk,
fin soup.
right, so when I hear people talk about it on Facebook or even personally, I don't know, I have this feeling that, sometimes it pisses me off, but at the same time, sometimes I pity. Sometimes there's a pity in me, like, oh, they don't really know what's happening. So can you dwell
Mhm.
more on this subject about food in China, especially exotic food? Because I'm living there and I haven't seen any exotic food in the market. In restaurants, I haven't seen
No,
like fried, like fried batter or something. I haven't seen one in 5 years.
it's hard to get. If you want it, it's hard to get, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's this is and the sort of stuff we're talking about. I mean, look, I think that a lot of these prey on, they play to our fascination with the exotic, you know? When you're learning about another country, especially when you're a kid or you're in school, you don't want to hear they're just the same as you are. The teacher's not going to say, okay, this is the life of a person who lives in the Philippines or a person who lives in England or a person who lives wherever. What are they going to focus on? They're going to focus on what's different, because that's what education is, right? We're going to tell you something you don't know.
Oh, okay.
And and so I think we grow up hearing about the exotic stuff about a country. So if somebody somewhere in China, there was some village, 100 years ago where bat was the delicacy, and some explorer at the time wrote it in a book, it's going to stay in our history books for a while, you know?
Mm, yeah.
And it's not just going to be, oh, somewhere in some small village, this local delicacy of rare, eats bats. It's going to be, people in China eat bats. It just gets put across the whole of the population. I mean, this happens either. And when sitting and they had these things sticking out of it that were trying to help them with social distancing. And a friend of mine sent me this article that showed this picture, and the headline was, kids in China wear these crazy hats for social distancing, blah, blah, blah. And she says, is this true? And I looked at the picture and I said, well, yeah, probably in this one class, some teacher had a project and they wanted to make them wear these funny hats. It looks interesting, but it's not kids in China doing this. It's some kids in one class in China, and with this thing, especially if it sounds, really interesting and unique, and imagine that everybody does it, or everybody's this way, right? I mean, there are places in the US where people eat alligators, not many. You gotta really seek it out. I had neighbors who liked to hunt and they would shoot squirrel and eat it, but you're not going to find squirrel anywhere in a restaurant. And most people in the US overwhelmingly have never had squirrel in their life and probably would never would. It's pretty much the same here, like all around the world, people will find themselves eating a lot of strange stuff, but you can't take these exotic things and believe that everybody's eating them and it's widely available. But Chinese, because China is so exotic to US citizens, I mean, it's on the other side of the world. We might be least educated about this country as we have anywhere else. The only stuff we've heard throughout growing up is the exotic stuff. And a lot of stuff doesn't happen anymore. Some of that stuff probably never did happen. A lot of time has passed, and it's time for us to learn a little bit more and realize that, it's just not a thing. So yeah, I never found any exotic food anywhere. And there's that tourist street in Wangfujing. Did you ever go to the food street on Wangfujing? Now you saw some
My
exotic
first
stuff
week,
there.
my first week I
Yeah.
went there. But the
Uh-huh.
thing is, I asked my what do you call this, the one who helps me to get an apartment, because she was the one who kind of took me there, like show me around, because I was still new. So we went to Wangfujing, and she told me that
Mm-hmm.
this street, most of the people who buy this stuff are the tourists. Locals never touch them, like the
Yeah.
Beijingers Beijingers don't buy them at all. They don't. They're disgusted by them. And most people who try those
No.
scorpions and those those grasshoppers are tourists. And
Yeah,
you get this
that's
idea just
exactly
because it's in the
right.
market that locals eat them, but no, they were specifically made for them to earn money, made for the tourist.
Yeah, because it's exotic. Gonna take pictures, but that's false in the right, because Beijing actually been, they. I don't think. Yeah. The China that talk and like bugs on a stick, and I mean, just nobody eats it. You can't get it in a restaurant. Nobody wants it, but it's out there because tourists will come by and take pictures with it and challenge themselves to eat it. And Beijing government has slowly been pushing that away, saying you're not allowed to do this anymore because it makes us look bad. So it's kind of interesting. Those
Actually,
efforts
it's
are.
becoming smaller. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way you said it when you said that the reason why people has this belief is that because people tend to teach what is different, and the things that are the same with your own country, you don't tend to dwell on them, for example. So you just dwell on the different things, and that's what sticks in people's minds. So it is a good take. I haven't thought about it before, so I think that's really good when you said it.
It's pretty natural. Well, see, I've never been. You grew up in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
And I've never been there. The only thing I know about the Philippines is I have had some Filipino friends, so I've had food, uh, and what I loved watching a lot of movies from the '70s. A lot of exploitation films in the '70s were filmed in the Philippines because it was a cheap and easy place to do it. Plus, there were some military altercations going on at that time, and they would actually loan planes and helicopters and things for war films and stuff like that. So my impression of the Philippines has always been that it's this jungle-filled, kind of dirty dirt roads and jungle, and um, beautiful women, but very violent, also because all these movies had lots of gunplay and fighting, and they're half of them are like have military or war or something to do with it. Very exotic films filmed in that location because they were so cheap. I mean, when people come and visit your country for the first time, do you find yourself having to explain away certain preconceived notions?
When they visit, not really, but the thing, they're foreigners, even in Beijing. My colleagues before, I remember one colleague even asked me, do you have horses in the Philippines? Like, I don't know what she's thinking about the Philippines, but she thought we don't have horses here, for example. Like, these kind of things that I get from foreigners that haven't been to the Philippines. But once they get here, I think we don't have to explain a lot of things to them.
Everything's pretty normal, pretty familiar. Is that is that how they feel?
Sorry, what was that again? It lagged a while ago. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. So you're saying they just glance around and say, "Oh, okay, this looks more familiar than I thought." Look, we went to Vietnam. As you said, my wife's family background is Vietnamese, but
Yeah.
she never actually was born in Vietnam. She didn't grow up in Vietnam, and so about 15 years ago, we took a trip from North Vietnam through South Vietnam, and all I knew about Vietnam at the time was about our war with America, because that was all we ever focused on or talked about in the same sentence with Vietnam.
Yeah.
and our movies were based around it, and all kinds of mythology and legends. My parents are Vietnam War vets, you know, I mean, it's very close to my generation. And so, you know, I had these same feelings like, oh, they're going to hate me over there. I'm an American coming in, and I'm going to be kind of subjected to some unpleasant conversation and altercations maybe, or I need to watch my step. And I found the exact opposite. I mean, I was super welcomed, and people, when they found out I was American, they were thrilled, or at least pretended to be thrilled so they could sell me something, whatever, you know. But I mean, probably to date, that is my favorite trip I've ever taken. Of those 2 weeks that we traveled through Vietnam, it was just a beautiful country with really, really warm and friendly people. And I don't know why in my mind I thought, you know, there would be this sort of like lingering cloud of the war, you know, sort of over it. Well, how silly is that? You know, of course not. We went to some places, and again, I think most of them are just set up for tourists who are interested in this sort of thing, where they had, you know, walls that had bullet holes in them and old tunnels from the war that were very interesting. And, you know, they'd show the traps and things that the Viet Cong would use to trap people and whatnot. It was very educational. I went to some museums. But that's when I realized for the first time that Vietnam's seen a lot of war, and a lot of people try to come in and colonize them. And at that point, I realized that maybe if they were mad at anybody, they were probably more mad at the French than they were at me, because their experience with French colonialism was a lot longer lasting and left a deeper mark than, you know, this almost decade-long war they had with America. So, you know, silly me, you come and you, from a perspective where context I had for learning anything about Vietnam growing up, and how sad is that? The only the only time we look and talk. Do we have a lag, or is this a pause in the conversation?
No, we have a lag. Yeah, sometimes it lags.
Okay.
So guys, bear with us. We were having some technical issues, but it's fine. We're still gonna get on with it. Like when you mentioned in Vietnam that you had a good time, but it's good thing that you were able to visit it and you had this amazing time. But the thing is, I think when you didn't visit the country, you had this perception about people hate you because you're an American and because of the war and all that stuff. But when you visited the country, that all went away, because you know that, okay, even though we had this war a long time ago, but the people are still friendly with me, even though I'm an American. And because you mentioned that, I also remember the time when I went to North Korea. I was with a lot of American tourists as well, in a tour company, right, in North Korea. So
Wow.
imagine North Korea. If you look at them, if you base it on the media, you think that they really hate the Americans, like genuinely hate Americans. But when we got there, there was one night where we even had a party with the locals. There was like a boat, like a cruise ship that we were housed into because that was a New Year's Eve party, and we went there. So a lot of my American friends, or I was with a tour company, so a lot of my American friends mingled with the locals, North Koreans, and they were so happy. They were friendly to the Americans, and the Americans said, "Oh, I didn't really expect that these people will treat us this way just because we're Americans." So I guess that's one of the advantage of traveling to different countries, most especially, is you get you get to realize that no, people don't hate us just because we're Americans, and that will only happen if you actually travel. So I think that's one of the benefits of traveling.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, you just hear everything filtered down. And a lot of what you hear about a country is not filtered down from individuals, it's filtered down through news, you know? So it always has a context, and that context is world events, which is almost always political. There's always some struggle, there's something going on. right? Uh, uh, and so unless you call back, I think, a bunch of negative events, probably more
Mhm.
negative events than positive events, especially because negative events are more thrilling and exciting and they have a deeper impact on us. They're the things we remember, right? I'll listen to somebody's war stories about Vietnam with intense interest. But if my playing, so that's why it shouldn't be, but it wouldn't be for me because I find that stuff fascinating too. But I think what I'm saying is most of what gets filtered down to us is that more sensationalist stuff that's rooted to a particular time, a particular place, a particular event, and most importantly, is usually political. It's usually activities and things and attitudes and strategy and diplomacy that's happening way above our heads. You know, the individual people are not involved in that. Um, you
No.
know, our countries could be at war with each other, but the people, would actually be quite friendly and happy with each other. I mean, that
Right.
has sort of proven itself time and time again. And so I think to a different level, I'm just using war as an example because it's an extreme, but I think that just kind of holds true. That's how we shape our feelings and our beliefs about a lot of countries we don't travel to. You have to
Right.
actively seek out the more authentic information that's not colored by all this. But the other stuff comes to you whether you like it or not. You'll run across it. So
Exactly. That's what I noticed. Like people here in my country who haven't been, for example, we were talking about China, I think one of the most misunderstood country. Like a lot of people here genuinely hate the country, and like what I've said, those who hate the country are those who listen to the stories in the media and they haven't been to the country. But once they get to the country, they experience the country, they experience the people, the hate just goes away. And for me, that's one of
yeah,
the main things here, that like the main point in what we're doing in this conversation, or in traveling, is when you get to travel, especially when you get to live in other countries, it lessens the hate in society just because we understand each other more. And I think hate stems from not understanding each other. And you don't
yeah,
understand each other because you haven't experienced each other yet. You just base it on the media. And I think that's one of the benefits of traveling. And what do you think, to what extent does this, because I think ignorance is one of the thing here, you know they hate towards each other. One of the reasons for this is ignorance, in my opinion. So what do you think, to what extent does ignorance play a role in the problems we're experiencing right now, like hatred, bigotry, and even racism? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, hello.
maybe we had another lag.
Yeah, we had did you hear
Maybe
what I say though?
I did. I heard everything you said. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think after what I said something, it lagged, so people didn't hear you. But did you
Oh,
answer?
okay.
Okay.
I'm
Sorry.
going to
Can
answer
you?
now.
Yeah, yeah. You can answer, like what I've said. To what extent does ignorance play a role in hatred that's happening right now in society in the present moment? Racism, hatred, bigotry. To what extent does ignorance play a role to what's happening?
I I think it's everything. I think it's ignorance and it's a lack of imagination. I mean, I think that even you don't have to go to another country. We don't even have to talk about people, across the world. We can talk about people living down the street from us. especially in the US. This is a very
Mhm.
apropos time to be talking about this, where it's very clear to me that a person who has either not had a lot of experience, for example, with African Americans, or not just knowing them on a casual level, but going to their home, eating food, hanging out with them, working with them, living beside them, and being a part of their world, they're usually the ones who it's they, they have this hatred or this misunderstanding, or at least these really strong stereotypes that are very unfair. And you don't need to, I think, travel to another country or have these deep experiences with people if you somehow possess a little bit of imagination and empathy. You
Mhm.
know, um, you can watch a film, you can read a book that will put you in somebody else's world for a little while. And that's the great thing about art, is it can help fill in those gaps for us. I recently read a study where it said that a little more better understanding but I much not have the advantages that I've had where I lived like maybe this guy lives or whatever. And in my mind, I've been able to conjure this up, some empathy.
Right.
So I think that's one way to do it. Traveling and physically living somewhere and sort of
Yeah.
physically living another life is another way to do it. But you don't need the means to travel. We have these other tools at our disposal to combat the ignorance. So I think literacy is super important. I think that some of my best friends who are really, really smart, they
Mhm.
dog on fiction and they say, "Oh, it's a waste of time. Like I'm not going to read stories. I want to read self-help books and I want to learn a new skill or whatever." I'm like, "No, you should read some fiction.
Okay.
There's real powerful stuff out there that can teach you things about people's experiences, and it will give you empathy and it will help you to understand better. It will help to fight this ignorance." So, there are those things. I mean, there's a lot of this kind of stuff, but I really find it hard to believe that you could hate someone and that hatred would come from anything other than pure ignorance as to who they are, what their motivations are, and what their experience is like. I'm not talking about somebody who's actually trying to kill you. I'm not talking about just everyday people, that we hold these stereotypes against is really unfortunate.
Right. And
I don't know.
a perfect example of that is the hatred that stems from the fear that is happening, especially with this pandemic that's going on. Like I remember when it started, and it started in China, right? And people are really hating like the Chinese people because of this. It's
Yeah, I
crazy.
couldn't
And
figure that out.
I saw your post on Facebook before clearing things up about these wrong information about the country, and it was just good. My friends and I were talking about you. It's like, oh, good thing Todd is clearing this up. This misinformation about the country. That's why people are hating. People are hating these people because of these misinformation, and you're clearing things up. So thank you so much for doing this. At least you were able to clear things up, especially with regards to misinformation and false stereotypes about countries that you have visited.
Yeah.
And we're about to end. Before we end, Todd, thank
I
you
think
so much for your time.
think
It's still it's lagging again.
yeah, it sounds like. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. So what I was
Well,
saying, yeah, what were you saying?
what I was saying is I was responding to you and I was saying it was also been a pleasure talking with you, and I feel like we could be talking for another 2 hours on this.
Yeah, yeah, but thank you so much for your time. I know I know you're busy there with school stuff as well, but you're able to find time in doing this, at least clearing things up and having a conversation about this very important topic about travel and disinformation and just stopping the hate that's going on in the world.
Yeah, if we can
So
manage that.
yeah. So before I end, any final words to our viewers about this topic, like just to wrap it up?
Yeah, I would just say the bad stuff you hear. I think humanity and people are at their core are genuinely good. I don't have a negative view of people. I don't think we start out bad and we become good. I think we start out good, and even when we become bad, sometimes it's with good intentions. Um, and so, whenever you hear bad stuff about people and places and things, and somebody's telling you this, you've got to consider they probably have an agenda. There's probably a reason they want you to hate somebody else. And if you can step away and realize that and examine it from that kind of critical perspective, I think you can take the first step away from falling into this trap, of falling for this trick is really what it is, of letting somebody else control you through your hate, right? There are a lot of people out there who this is what they do. They try to control you by trying to stir up powerful hatred and emotions in you. It's
Right.
what they're doing.
Exactly.
Just yeah, try to go against that. Recognize it for what it is. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
We can all do that.
And probably traveling will help as well.
Of course, it would.
It's lagging
Of
again.
course, it would. For sure. Thank you.
All right, Todd, thank you so much for your time. I hope you're well there and safe despite of what's
Thank
going on.
you too. Thanks.
Yeah. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Todd.
All right. See you later. Bye
All right,
bye.
see ya.